Dynamically determining what UI and functionality is needed and creating the constructs programmatically at runtime is the ultimate in dynamic UIs. Once we've got this in our toolkit and learned where and how to use it, we're about ready for whatever UI requirements are thrown at us. One thing to know about dynamic components before we really dig in is that it's different from lazy loading. Lazy loading is pulling statically created modules into your application as they're needed. While some lazy loaded modules might contain dynamic components, not all lazy loaded modules contain dynamic components, and not all dynamic components are lazy loaded. Dynamic components is all about creating new instances of previously defined components and injecting them into your application at runtime, based, presumably, upon values and conditions that can only be known at runtime. We'll look at an example of this in our demo in just a moment, but first I want to cover the pieces of Angular that make this all work. Be aware that this is one area of Angular that's seen many changes from the beta through to the current release, v5. So while there's a fair amount of information on how to do this online, be careful because a lot of it is outdated. This seems to be fairly well solidified now, so I don't expect it to change much in future releases. There are two approaches to creating dynamic components. The first uses a directive new in v4 called ngComponentOutlet. This approach is mostly declarative. The only code you write is to actually assign the component to be instantiated. That makes it pretty easy to work with, at least for simple scenarios. The other option is using Component Factory Resolver. Beneath the covers, ngComponentOutlet is just a layer on top of Component Factory Resolver that does the work for you. Component Factory Resolver is a programmatic solution, so it's a bit more involved, but the code is mostly boilerplate, so it's not hard. The nice thing about this second approach is that you get access to the dynamically created component instance, so if you need to interact with its properties or events, you can. For ngComponentOutlet, there's a pull request pending as of December of 2017 that will give access to the component instance inputs and outputs, which isn't exactly the same as full access to the component instance, but it's a good start.